Good morning,
Yes.
everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
Cheng,
Good
and good
morning.
morning, Dr. Khosravi. It's my honor to be with you, and very welcome to the second forum of a New World series on the future of the world, culture, science, and technology. Today, the discussion will be on the subject of digital humanities and its impact on higher education. We are privileged to host two professors from Hong Kong and Tehran who will exchange their ideas on the subject. The participation of two academic leaders from Iran and China will, of course, facilitate intercultural awareness and promote international exchange of ideas. This information exchange will definitely nurture and generate new ideas and knowledge. Before commencing the discussion, will you please let me introduce the guests? It would be my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Cheng, PhD in the field of education policy and planning from London Institute of Education. His research focuses on institutional evaluation and accreditation, policy discussion, and training in higher education in various jurisdictions, recently in China, Mongolia, Cambodia, Kazakhstan, and Vietnam. Currently, Dr. Cheng is Emeritus Professor at the University of Hong Kong, the Director of Education Policy Unit at the Faculty of Education, and he is the ex-Chair Professor of Education, Dean of Education, Vice President and Senior Advisor to the University Chancellor, as well as the ex-Chairman of the International Council for the Education of Teachers. He has been the consultant at the World Bank, UNESCO, UNICEF, UNDP, IIEP, and the Asian Development Bank. His main contribution is the establishment and development of the Alumni Affairs Office in 1999. Presently, he is a member of China Education Forum, visiting lecturer at the National Academy of Education at Administration China and Skolkovo, Russia. We do indeed appreciate your participation and bestowing us with your own presence.
Thank you.
I'm also acknowledged to introduce Dr. Khosravi, PhD in the field of communication from Tehran University, Assistant Professor at the Department of Cyberspace Studies, Institute for Social and Cultural Studies, Tehran. Dr. Khosravi's field of interests are digital media user studies, the idea of digital university, and post-digital post-humanities. His recent research is centered on human-computer interaction, human information interaction, computer-mediated communication, dialogue and discussion in social networks, and virtual communities, user-generated contents, and participatory cultures and social media platforms. His recent publications were on digital divide, freedom of expression and academia, and on internet, and freedom of information and internet. Currently, he is working on online learning in higher education, misperceptions of digital literature, and the concept of post-digital academic cultures. Thank you, Dr. Khosravi, so much for doing so much for us. Today in our forum, we are exploring digital humanities impact on higher education. By your leave, I am presenting a very brief introduction to our subject of discussion. If you don't mind, I will present a very short introduction to the subject. May I?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Digital humanities is an emerging discipline that applies computation to research on the humanities. We use digital humanities as an umbrella term for a number of different activities that surround technology and humanities scholarship. Digital humanities is not a unified field, but an array of convergent practices that explore a universe in which print is no longer the exclusive or the normative medium of production and dissemination of knowledge. Rather, print being absorbed into new multimedia configurations have altered the production and dissemination of knowledge in art, human, and social sciences. However, the mere use of digital tools for the purpose of humanistic research and communication does not qualify as digital humanities, nor is digital humanities to be understood as a study of digital artifacts, new media, or contemporary culture in place of physical artifacts, old media, or historical culture. On the contrary, digital humanities understands its object of study as the entire human record, from prehistory to the present. It is an interdisciplinary field, the marriage of technology and humanities in name, crossing the borders between humanities and digital technology. Being methodological in nature, digital humanity is also called a handmaiden to humanities. Now let's enjoy the precious ideas of our guests on the role of digital humanities on higher education. There are lots of questions haunting our forum on a revolutionary role of digital humanities on higher education. So let's start with precious ideas of Dr. Cheng on the subject of digital humanities. Please, Dr. Cheng, for the first question, bring to light the definition as well as the brief history of digital humanities and its current phase.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm quite glad to accept the invitation and interact with our colleagues in Iran. However, once I accepted the invitation, I almost regretted because I'm not an expert in digital humanity. And in my part of the academic world, we seldom use this term, although, as you mentioned, the issues are very much on our mind. So I'll be talking about this on my general observation about humanity in vis-a-vis advancement of technology. And I just realized that Dr. Hovani is really an expert in that. So I'm trying to leave more room for him to express. I respond to his observations. I think he is much more knowledgeable than I in this particular area. Technology has always been there since human history. But now the technology is so much attracting our attention for two reasons. One, it is advancing so quickly that most of the world have difficulties in catching up. And because of that, people have all kinds of speculations, either good or bad, about technology advancement. But the second reason is that technology, unlike in the earlier days, it is now spreading to all the social sectors. If you go to very underdeveloped regions of the world, people are using mobile phones and so on and so forth. So the scale and the speed are really unprecedented. I can quote you two examples. One was in the late 1960s, when television the first time came into Hong Kong society, and one of the leading trade unions was saying that they have created a small children's rhyme saying that television is coming, television is dangerous, it will hurt our children. So that was the thinking at that time, and it's understandable. Technology is something that beyond your normal life, and you second guess what it would be. However, 1997, I was visiting Singapore when Singapore was introducing Singapore One. That is, the whole Singapore will be covered, will be connected digitally. And I visited the Ministry of Education, and the person in charge of IT said, technology is the most advanced when it is taken for granted. Well, this still makes sense to me, right? We are full of technology all over our body. We have mobile phones, we have digital watches, we have all sorts of things in our office which are very, very technological, but not all of them are of an interest to understand what is inside. So sooner or later, things will be taken for granted. But before they are taken for granted, people have fears, people have troubles, and the fears and troubles are not unreasonable. So the first thing is technology has never ever been there, but now the technology advancement is quicker than we expected and spreading to more people than that technology has ever been. The second point is that in this part of the world, in my part of the world, in society, now I'm from Hong Kong. Of course, Hong Kong cannot represent mainland China, which is a different legislation, jurisdiction. However, the advancement of technology in mainland China is much faster than Hong Kong. Not in terms of innovations, perhaps, but in terms of the infiltration, diffusion into daily life. In mainland China, for example, no one will use any bank notes, any physical money. For example, the high-speed train, which is the fastest in the world, requires no ticket. You just present your identity card, and so on and so forth. Hong Kong is far from there. But then we have the same mentality that technology is a good thing. You never think of whether it will carry any negative effects. And people, the discussion of technology is very much dominated by technologists, by people, by inventors of technology. And the users of technology are very much passive. In Hong Kong, before the pandemic, I'm in education, so I visit many schools. Before the pandemic, before the school suspension, that is before 2020, early 2020, the Hong Kong's electronic diffusion is very high. That is, everybody is having a mobile or 2 or 3 mobiles. However, the use of IT in schools are very low. Only about 15% of the schools are using any e-learning. And the e-learning in those days were promoted by the big companies, Microsoft, Google, Tencent, and so on and so forth. They tell the schools that this is something new. You have to use this. And that is the initiation of technology. The suspension of schools since pandemic is about 3 years. We have just started to start normal schooling. For 3 years, the use of technology has changed. Teachers are using many technologies from many providers. So they become the masters of technology rather than the providers. So this is a good thing. However, there are social issues that have skipped our attention. And perhaps digital humanities is fairer to those balance between good and bad effects. For example, one of the technologies effect is to replace human beings. But in reality, in our daily life, what is replacing are basically the low-cost labor, people who are at the bottom of society. They are the first to be replaced in order to cut cost. For example, technology enables people to extend our capacities, to move faster, to move far away, to go to bigger world, to move into micro world like a human body. But on the other hand, it has created a virtual society where you have as many good things as many cheatings and crimes. And but I really appreciate that those in doing digital humanities will move into those areas. I'm not moving into weapons, for example. Right? The advancement of technology in many countries are basically talking about we have higher technology because we can kill more people. Right? What's that? Is humanity moving upwards or moving downwards? And all these are worrisome. So this is my second point. And I have high hopes that maybe Iran can take a lead, because in the other parts of the world, although they are talking about digital humanity, but it's basically on the sideline of the academic literature. And the third thing I want to raise, and I'll finish by that, is the emphasis on technology at the expense of humanities is almost a culture. Uh, there is a writer, Howard Gardner, who are better known for multiple intelligences. He's a professor at Harvard. In 1984, he wrote an article that there could be three cultures about human key competencies. One is about human capacity to understand the human interaction with the natural world. The second is human competency in dealing with people. And the third is human beings interacting with man-made artifacts. I would say the Western world, if you take the mainstream of Western world as the Anglo-Saxon world, the English-speaking world, it is fundamentally emphasizing on human-nature relationship. Therefore, there is a predominant emphasis on science, technology, data, and so on and so forth, at the expense of humanities. And this is most recently typified by, education, so I'm talking about education, by the so-called 21st century skills, which was initiated in the US before the turn of the century, but became a rather mainstream discussion since the turn of the century. It is talking about new world, 21st century, therefore you need new skills. But if you look at the skills, they're basically about the skills you need in work. It's about what kind of skills are expected in 21st century workplace. And people are spreading this all over the world as if it is the basic truth. It encounters some modification in Singapore. Singapore is saying that this is about performance, but education is not only about work performance. And therefore, they started a new framework with 6 core values, national core values, and the purpose of creating 4 kinds of people: active learner, responsible citizenship, caring for others, and so on and so forth. Right? So they take human beings at the center of education, not skills. This encountered a further discussion, and I participate in a part of discussion in Taiwan, another Chinese community. In Taiwan, the leading academics say, well, performance is what you can see by other people when you show out, when you display. But education is about your intrinsic values. And therefore, they created a term called 素养, which I cannot translate. It's about quality of people. They said this is more important than competencies. Competencies about what you can display in workplace, but a person is a good person when he or she is intrinsically of very healthy values. So I'm not so sure how this would go, because in mainland China, for example, technology is spreading so fast, little is discussing, few people are discussing about the negative effects or possible negative effects of technology. But this will sooner or later emerge in the horizon, because you cannot skip humanities when you talk about technological advancement. Now, maybe I should stop here. Otherwise, I can go on for another hour. So forgive me if I sound so ignorant about the discipline of digital humanities, but I'll stop here.
Shall I start? I guess the admin is out for a few minutes, so let me provide feedback till she returns. The very first thing I have to mention is thank you for having me here, and that is my honor to have Professor Cheng. Um, First of all, I have to say that what I'm going to share in this session is not the mainstream digital humanities scholarship views. It is not the representation of ideas of our institute in Tehran, and of course, it's not what we can call, for example, Iranian opinions on digital humanities. It is very personal um, engagement with the field in the last few months. The second thing that I want to share is about what Professor Cheng mentioned very correctly. It is about a continuum, a spectrum of radical things, extreme ideas about digital humanities. It's about how we see technology in humanities. In one hand, we have technophiles who are very interested in applying technology into any field, and it includes humanities, of course. And the other hand, we have technophobics, who prefers traditional humanities research, going to the libraries, having discussion sessions, journal clubs, and those materials. And of course, many of us are not positioned in just one of these extremes, but we are sort of navigating between these two. And what am I going to discuss in this session is much more close to the traditional approach. It is sort of critical, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to accept digital humanities as a requirement for the new world. Um, as Dr. Cheng mentioned in his talk, the problem is not about if we are going to have technology in um, humanities scholarship or not. Um, Either we want it or not, we are going to apply it because it is funded by big institutions. It is a sort of a global impetus to do it. And because most of the power is in the hands of those who are very interested in them. Those scholars previously working on quantitative methods and the fans of logical positivism. Actually, as far as I know, they are in power not just in the national scale but at the globe. So the problem is about how much it is available, how much it is accessible, how much it is affordable, how much it is
Mm,
usable, and
mm,
how much it will be influential in the sense of social responsibility of academia. What we're going to discuss today is that what is the benefits, what are the advantages of having digital humanities, rather than is it good or bad, but maybe it is a good topic for a kindergarten or, for example, primary school essay, but not for the university level thing. Um, the story is sort of similar to past technologies. We have similar concerns when internet came to Iran. There was lots of rumors about that it is an example of cultural imperialism. They are going to gather data from us in order to, for example, invade us. It was an extraterrestrial perception of technology. It was like an ET for many of us, and it is not something new. It has a very long past. For example, as far as I know, at least it is I don't know, maybe it was just a rumor, a story, but I heard that when they wanted to develop the railroads in UK, some farmers resisted, and they said, in the case that you are going to put some irons around our farms, they are going to affect our grounds and cows even. You are going to, for example, ruin our agricultural economy. And after a while, it developed, and nothing happened. At least it was not as awful as they thought. The story is sort of similar about technology and internet in the last 20 years in Iran, and it is, I guess, the same story about digital humanities. Maybe we are going to have some resistance in the beginning. We are going to just put emphasis on the critical aspects, but after a while, either I will love it or not, it is going to be part of the mainstream scholarship. So, to put the introduction to an end, a very short end, I want to say that the long history of putting technology and humanities into different things, to put them in dichotomies of opposites, I guess it's part of the past. Right now, we are in the paradigm of post-humanism, which is looking at the things, both the human agency and the technological drivers at the same time. They are in interaction and interaction. So we are not going to put them just choosing one in contrast to the other, but we are going to think about the potential consequences of applying digital humanities in the next future. I want to organize my talk into three different parts. The very first one is about what is digital humanities and what are the different terminologies which are sort of related to it. The second part is about digital humanities in academia. I'm going to focus on both the educational part and the research. And the third part will be about what is the contribution of digital humanities to academia. Is it a better way for doing social research or no? Okay, so let's start with what is digital humanities. I want to divide the term into two different words. The very first one is humanities, and the other one is digital. So what is humanities? As far as I know, or at least the humanities that I'm going to talk about, is that thing appeared in the times of Renaissance after the long medieval ages. And it was in contrast to divinity, it was in contrast to those scholastic lessons in the churches. So which the humanities I'm going to talk about is the secular one. It is about it starts with centering human, not just in the center of analysis, but in the center of valuing. Whatever we are going to do is not just based on what a human needs or think or behave, but also we are doing our best to have a contribution to human being as a general idea, not although it has been criticized of being just a colonizing Western white blah blah thing. But right now we are going to put emphasis that I'm not going to talk about digital humanities in the context of, for example, Islamic thing, that it is just about the humanities in the very orthodox way. The second thing, it is what humanities was basically defined by, in contrast to sciences, natural sciences, practical sciences, what we call, for example, formal sciences like mathematics and STEAM, were based on understanding things from our own senses. It was based on experiments, experimental methods. But humanities is not based on what we can perceive from the natural world, but it is about what we think, what we talk, and what we are going to contribute with others. So it is basically, it is fundamentally, at least in my opinion, it is something dialectical. That means there is a thesis, antithesis, and there is a synthesis between these two. It is dialogical. That means it is a dialogue. It is a discussion. It is a conversation between two parts at least. And it is dialogical. That means there are different logics, and you have to provide both logics, both benefits, and the potential problems. And let's now focus on the first word, which is data, digital. And there are different definitions for digital. The very basic definition is that it is about the binary type of data. It is, that means you quantify everything into just zeros and ones. It is about put everything into something processable, something that you can quantify, something that you can work on. something that can be understood by a computer, so computers can work on them. So when we are talking about digital humanities, we are going to talk about using digital technologies in understanding humanities text, humanities scholarship. Basically, they are in contrast as far as I see, because humanities is based on dialogical and dialectical things. It is about discussions between two human beings. It is about hearing others and at the same time trying to have to echo their voices in your own speech. And when you put it into a technology thing, most probably it will be something reduced to something very natural, something without values, something without sentiments. But it is just one definition of digital humanities. The second definition is about um, using technology in order just to process the very basic phase of social research. That means you are not going to put all of your efforts into a computer. It is not going to do all of the research for you. It is not going to have an interpretation for you. It is just going to have a data analysis on what have been gathered, for example, over the web. So after a basic categorization, a classification of data, now you have a sort of or information organization, and now you can put your own ideas, your analytical framework onto it and make sense of it. In the second sense, digital humanities is just something technical rather than something epistemological. So and this is how I'm going to approach the topic. The second part of my talk will be about, okay, now we have a sense of what is digital humanities, in the case that it is using new methods, new tools to analyze old materials, old texts. So what is happening to digital humanities in academia, both in Iran and all around the world? As far as I know, there are different realms of digital humanities. In Europe, the pioneer was United Kingdom, and it was the King's College in London. It started with researches and then postgraduate degrees in digital humanities. And by digital humanities, they meant that going to the libraries, digitize the text, and now try to have a new understanding of the text by pattern recognition, text mining, and blah blah. Then in the next part of the Anglo-Saxon world, it was University of Alberta in Canada, as far as I know. They started a graduate program, master degree actually, with the same name, but actually the basic name was Humanities Computing, and the term was coined by engineers, by computer scientists. They thought that everything can be computed, and one of those things is humanities. But after a while, they realized that the content of digital humanities and humanities is basically something completely different from natural sciences. So it is not just about computing, but also about the ontological things. So they changed the term into digital humanities. In the other part of the North America, the very first program, as far as I know, is Social Informatics at University of Indiana Bloomington, and it provided an analysis of the social context of using information in the new world. And later they added some courses in digital humanities, but they tried to make a distinction between humanities in the uh, very traditional classical way of, for example, things related to language, literature, literacy, in contrast to the social thing, which was about the cultural context of using the technology, as the cultural studies term suggests, which is appropriation, to use things for your own usage. And the very um, recent but very pioneer part of the work is about the New Zealand. As far as I know, there is a research hub for digital humanities. You can access to lots of digitized texts in University of Otago. Then we have graduate degree, master degree actually in University of Canterbury. It also provides a graduate certificate for people who are working in the government of New Zealand. And those people, for example, working in the libraries. And the third one is a course specifically in the museum studies at University of Wellington. And they joined the trend sort of later than others, but it seems their speed is sort of fast, at least as far as I see. Let's do some de-westernizing digital humanities. In the other part of the world, in the southeast of Asia, three countries, as Professor Cheng mentioned in his speech, are pioneers of digital humanities. Korea, actually, one of the programs in of Korean language. It is just more about the research. It's about using big linguistic data and how to analyze it. Then we have Japan. They have a scholarly community of people. You can join it in the case that you are interested. There is a formal association of digital humanities practitioners, and also it has a journal publishing things on digital humanities, anything worldwide. And they also have institute for research. They are providing funding for research projects all around the Japan, but their focus is on the national issues, both digital, I mean traditional Japanese arts and literature. And the last one is about Singapore, and they have a research hub as it is expected from them. University of Technology and Design provides a minor in digital humanities. That means if you are doing a major in another humanities or social studies discipline, also you can have a minor in digital humanities. They are providing more technical things, hands-on skills, so you can join the market as soon as possible to do the research. And also in the Nanyang Technological University, there is a course at graduate level provided by the but in the Western term. So let's put it into the Iranian context. As far as I know, there are different, um, I can call them just very starts. The very first one was the Computer Research Center for Islamic Studies, which is much more popular as Noor Center. About 2 decades ago, they started to digitalize Islamic texts, either from the not just the Quran itself, but also the most of the things which are valuable historical materials for the Shia sect actually. And after a while, they provided Windows-based softwares to access them and to have some text processing materials. And later, they provided the Android applications for the same purpose. And they are doing the same thing on the web platform right now also. One of the contributions of Noor Center was having established the Noor Mags, which is a digital scholarship hub. You can search all over, not just the journal papers, but also about ebooks related not just to Islam or Iran, but anything available to Iranian librarian association. And the second thing that I can say about is about the one of the research things happened in Iran. It was by the Institute for Theoretical Physics in Tehran. They started a neurolinguistics labs about I think 12, I guess, years ago, and they are doing some researches on physical acoustics and, of course, on some psycholinguistics materials. And part of their researches are um, in the phase of data collection are experimental, and in the phase of data analysis are computer based. So I guess they are pioneers of the field. In the educational part of the Iranian society, we have a master degree in computational linguistics in Sharif University of Technology. It is sort of similar, comparable to what University of Saarland, Osnabrück in Germany provide. It is based on natural language processing, text mining, using the artificial intelligence and those materials to process Persian text or Farsi texts, because we have difficulties in processing a completely non-Western language, and it needs a completely different trend of providing technologies. And as far as I remember, there are the things that happening around, and we have some researchers in university level, but they are sort of very limited to the campus. For example, University of Tehran, and there is a laboratory for social media metrics, and another one in order to use the natural language processing for human metrics. But most of people involved in those researches are just engineers. It is very technical, and because we do not hear from them, and they do not hear from us, actually there's no interdisciplinary collaboration between us, and maybe that is one of the reasons that it is not taking us anywhere. So to put an end to my very long talk, I want to say, okay, what is the advantages and disadvantages of having digital humanities, at least for the Iranian society, Iranian scholarship? Um, there have been very underpinning critical discussions about the digital humanities. The very first thing was about the thesis of intersectionality and digital humanities. For a long time, women have been underrepresented in computing circles, computing communities. And that is one of the reasons there are affirmative actions for their participation, their presence in engineering. As for example, we have Maryam Mirzakhani's Prize for Women in Computing and Mathematics. And it is the same story about digital humanities. When you go to those laboratories, those libraries working on digital humanities or computational social sciences, most of the people involved are male, and they are doing the thing in a male-dominated way. Maybe the idea of computing humanities, the idea of that the word of humanities must be something approachable for me, to something controllable, something under the way of being manipulated, is a sort of a patriarchal way. And it is the same about the racial and national issues as well. For example, for a long time, digital humanities was something just for the not just the Western world, but for the English. And the story about Eastern Asian languages was completely different, and it is about Farsi as well. And it is about the accessibility by different parts of the society. Right now, what is doing in digital humanities is mostly for research and for funded institutions, big institutions, sort of think tanks, rather than for education. That means hardly ever you hear that someone is using digital humanities as a instructional technology in his or her classes. So it is not as usable as it was expected. And above all, what is more critical is that it is not accessible for publics, that there is no research hub that many Iranians can go over that, for example, search engine and have access to digitized text and learn how to use them in their everyday life. So it is very in very elitistic way right now. And in the case that we have egalitarianistic impetus to make things in another way, it should be available to the public. And the last thing that I want to talk about is about using digital humanities on itself. We are under the way of datafication and data valence. It is not just about surveillance anymore. We are under the threat of being violated our privacies, because data is available everywhere. If you are taking a taxi, if you are ordering a food, if you are searching for an article over Google Scholar, everything is going to be tracked and traced. Maybe it is not something many scholars, specifically those critical humanities scholars, are interested in. They prefer to have their own privacy. Privacy is not just about your personal matters, but also about your scholarship thing. So it is not, maybe digital humanities pioneers had good intentions, but the road to the heaven is not paved by good intentions. Maybe it is going to be done in the favor of the governments, specifically those governments who are not much democratic. We are under the threat of being tracked by not just governments inside of Iran, but also other governments, intelligence services. So there are lots of topics that must be discussed about the consequences of digital humanities rather than having it in our academia or not. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Sadra, for the comprehensive content you shared with us. Unfortunately, Dr. Khadem has a problem, and so I want to ask a question from Dr. Cheng. That how do you assess Dr. Sadra's views, and from your perspective, what are the outcomes and merits of digital humanities? you believe that in the coming future, our conventional humanities will be submerged or complemented by digital humanities?
I'm not so sure this would happen. On the one hand, yeah, since the 1960s and 70s, since the Soviet Sputnik satellite, so the kind of purely data-based science becomes prevalent, and it is still very much now. However, in the realms of education, sociology, and even economics, there is a trend of relying on qualitative research. I'm a graduate of mathematics, but I teach qualitative research. And I think qualitative research is a very different way of looking at things. A lot of things that are happening, for example, in education, is not measurable by immediate outcomes. I taught physics in schools. So when these students pass physics with high scores, does that mean that he or she has learned physics? No, it's just a process. And how to understand the process is totally different from finding immediate results. And that is perhaps the fundamentals that we have to deal with digital humanity. Because how to view, like Sadra just said, how to look at data, how to look at calculatable, computable data is important. I think it is a certain period of human history that people suddenly turn to numbers, turn to purely computational science. And I think there has to be a turn. And the turn is happening in some areas, but not in others. And for example, even in economics, there are people talking about cultural economics, about behavioral economics, and so on and so forth. And of course, still you may use a lot of number. I don't hate number. I'm a mathematics graduate, but numbers don't tell the entire truth. And I think that has to be emphasized. And this is one thing that maybe in cultures which do not have a very too strong a digital culture, a digital tradition, should take a lead. I think the world is now becoming diverse. And maybe when I listen to Dr. Khosravi, I think that maybe we should join hands and at least organize in a not too far future at least a global conference on the topic, so that those who have ideas about this can air their opinions and come together with something that can inform the world. At least they can raise questions to the world that is this really going to happen and going to be emphasized? People may agree, may disagree, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a question, it keeps people's mind going. And now I know I'm not exactly answering your question, but this is what is in my mind. I think the kind of a qualitative humanistic understanding of society, of technology is so essential. It's so essential. Otherwise, I will not immediately take this as a hegemony from certain culture to another culture, but I don't think the world should become a hegemony of only technologies, only computational technologies. Maybe I should stop there because I can go on.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to ask the next question from Dr. Sadra. How do you estimate the development of digital humanities in the board? to what extent has digital humanities been prevalent in educational and research fields? Is it welcomed by the scientists of humanities?
Actually, the adopting and adapting ourselves to the digital humanities started many years ago in Iranian academia. It's almost more than a decade. And when you go to faculties of social studies, you can see that they use not just SPSS for quantitative analysis, but also
Yeah.
uh, in vivo, Max CUDA, or for example, Atlas TI for qualitative research. So either we like it or not, it is happening inside of our academia. One of the reasons maybe is that some people who wants to look more scientific, specifically in the social studies, prefer to work with numbers, and softwares are good ways to do this. The other thing is that we are doing research not just for ourselves, but also for the people. And before people, there's an intermediary, which is a very big intermediary, and that's government. Government bodies are very interested in tables, diagrams, charts, and blah blah. If you write them essays, long papers, especially critical things, most probably they are not going to read it. That's the reason that there's this executive summary in the beginning of each essay. And if you're doing digital humanities, that means you are going to abstract information from long essays into just small pieces, which is visualized. And it is not just much more um, usable for the publics, but also it is much more referable by the governmental bodies. So it is going to continue as far as I see. But it is about how we are going to react it. In the case that we are just going to ignore it, I guess it means that we are just postponing the thing, as Galtung suggests in his theory of development. Already there is a big gap between Iran and those countries, so-called developed countries. And in the case that we are not going to absorb digital humanities, this gap is going to be much more widened. It will be a divide, a digital divide in academia. But how we are going to put things into critical way? Uh, as a graduate of social studies, it is very popular for us to end our essays, our theses, dissertations with a chapter or at least a section on discussions. We can use digital humanities in our researches, but in the part or in the section of the discussions, I guess we have to say, okay, my study has these specific limitations. For example, data used in this research, how I analyzed it, how I'm trying to apply that theoretical framework on this data has these specific limitations. These are the things that I may ignore, or for example, forgotten, or for example, that was not under my control. So the problem is how you are going to approach digital humanities rather than approaching it or not. It's about having some critical points. In Iran, we have a specific term. I don't know if it has something similar in the Western world or not. They call it a cultural appendix, that you think about everything in a technological way to absorb the technology, but putting attention to the fact that it is just a machine, it is just processing data. All it can do is just zeros and ones. You are the one designing the research, conducting the research, and evaluating the research. So I guess most of Iranian, at least the mainstream Iranian scholars in social studies are going to be attracted to digital humanities. Specifically, there are some workshops on use of data science, for example, use of big data analysis and blah blah. But how they are going to react is different department to department and person to person. For example, it is sort of expected for me, people in the department of the faculty of arts in University of Tehran who are focused on, for example, teaching philosophy or Persian literature are sort of reluctant and resistant to absorb digital humanities because they are much involved and engaged with their library. They prefer go to their professor's room, talk, have lengthy talks, and blah blah. But for example, in the Department of Education, it is right now very prevalent to see that the students want to do some learning analytic work, which is based on digital uses of digital humanities. Or for example, if you go to the Faculty of Management or Entrepreneurship, things like this, You can see that doing business analytic things in order specifically about the social media platforms and digital transformations over there is very prevalent. And of course, those are the leaders of the market, and most probably other parts of the humanities are going to accompany them sooner or later, either they like it or not.
May I add on this? I appreciate very much Dr. Khosrani's kind of a dialectical rather than dichotomizing the issue. I think for data, digits, computations, and so on and so forth, it's not a matter whether it is good or bad, as Dr. Khosrani mentioned. It's a matter of what are their uses and what are their abuses. That is, to what extent they are useful and to what extent they are not useful. Now, I give you a very typical example. China, for example, has a huge exercise to eradicate poverty. And without number, you can't tell the truth, tell the greatness of the whole thing. It's over, I can't have the, remember, it's over 20 million villages which are turned from under poverty to prosperity. However, all this will not be convincing unless you tell the stories of how they develop, what happened to human beings inside, and why they are changing, and so on and so forth. So there are two kinds of research and two kinds of sciences to tell the truth. And I think it is important not to neglect one and neglect one by emphasizing only the other.
Okay, let me add something to your very valuable thing. Um, as you mentioned, eradicating poverty through using digital tools, for example, digital humanities, is very popular. It is an initiative by the World Bank. They believe that in the case that you can learn how to use digital technologies, for example, for web development, for programming, and working with data, then you can be hired in good companies, you can earn your income, then you can have social mobility, and everything is going to be very good. Okay, but the very basic question is, okay, who has the access to computers? Who can afford taking classes, trainings in computing and data analysis? And who has access to that data, specifically big data about, for example, taken from social surveys or, for example, from these materials. Already there is a digital divide, and in the case that digital humanities is going to be the mainstream of humanities departments, it is just a concern. I'm not going to say it is going to happen. I'm not trying to provide an apocalyptic view of the future, but it is just a possibility that this digital divide in the academia, just not just in Iran but also around the world, is going to be widened. That means right now there is a digital divide between University of Tehran and universities in smaller cities, those with lower funds. And of course, there is a digital divide between University of Tehran and, for example, Beckman Institute of Internet and Society in Harvard University. And by the development of digital humanities, both things are going to happen. Maybe by learning how to use them, we can decrease this level of digital divide. But at the same time, because they are doing their endeavors, this divide is under the concern, under the threat of being widened.
Yeah, I can add to that. For example, in terms of poverty or kind of economic development, World Bank used to use GDP or GNP, which is very good. However, UNICEF, since I think the past 5 or 6 years, have begun to understand that it's not enough to know GDP, right? Even a place's GDP higher doesn't mean that it is improved in society. So they created other things like disparity and equity, like students' education, like care about health, like culture, and so on and so forth. Now, my question is, how do you know? How do you know all these parameters are important? So unless you know the whole story, unless you have a very humanistic approach to the whole thing, you don't have the parameters. Parameters are man-made. and man-made parameters, not because they are numbers, because they come from reality, and the reality is a human history, a human story. So I think we have to put that back into reality to become a more balanced way of looking at society and looking at even technological development.
Yes, you are very right that it is a possibility that we are doing dehumanizing humanities by doing the digital thing.
Oh yeah.
It is a possibility also to rehumanize digital humanities. If we are trying just to be two different islands far from each other, we do not talk to those people involved in the research, they are not going to stop what they are doing because they are making money of it, and they are going to sell it to governments and to third parties. So why not we're going to approach them and use them in our own researches, and also inform them what are the critical considerations about what they are doing with the technology.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure the admin is online or not. For me, that's the final words. If you have things to share with us, we are very glad to hear.
Yeah, my last word is thank you very much for this very good, very unusual opportunity. It's my first interaction with Iranian academics. So I think this will be a good starting point. Let us do something together.
Yeah, sure. That was my pleasure to have you. It was
Yeah.
very great of you to let us hear your voices.
I have already in mind organizing a kind of a seminar with different parts of the world academics coming together to discuss the whole thing, because it is for human future, which is essential to ask questions.
The very first step can be just having more discussions. Maybe we can have some interdisciplinary collaborations. Okay, she's on.
Yes. My
Everyone,
yes.
so
Okay.
sorry. I had internet connection problem. Do you have my voice?
Yes.
Yes, we
So
can.
sorry. I missed most of your precious speech. I do apologize. Actually, it was a discussion about digital era, digital revolution, and how it influences the realm of academia. And my problem was also related to digital problem. I do apologize. I got disconnected and I missed most of your yes. As long as I noticed the main ideas were about the methodological aspect of digital humanities and the way that it can influence even as it represents power relations. I just grabbed some words, actually, not all of your speech. I didn't have voice. And the way that there is a gap in this field, and it is mainly dominated by technical engineers and actually males. It is male dominated. And my question is that how does this institutionalizing and professionalizing of digital humanities can influence public culture? I don't know if this question was answered or not. I mean, can public access to digital humanity influence the knowledge, or is there any possibility to even to transform the truth production through this digital humanity as a method of analyzing and processing humanities, because it gives more chance to the public to big knowledge? I mean, is it just kind of expanding the scope and giving access to the public and changing and transforming public the truth in the public? Was it clear?
Yes.
Yes,
I think it's yeah.
just go on. Please go on.
Yeah. It's a long journey. First of all, translating academic wisdom, academic research, into policies, into public knowledge is a long journey, and we cannot underestimate that journey. So we have to think of not of a ladder. That is, what are the first steps you can do? As I mentioned earlier, the first thing is for academics with like minds to come together, so that it is not limited to one institution, one person, or only even one nation, one system. But the first thing is perhaps asking questions. I think asking questions is more than giving people conclusions. And we have plenty of questions even from this seminar. And that will be the starting point. But don't estimate the journey. The journey is likely to be very long, because the entire education system now is product of the industrial society. It's still taking education as a kind of a production line. And this is not going to change overnight, but unless we raise questions to break through some of the things that are taken for granted, we will not get anywhere. But asking questions, breaking through some of the fundamental assumptions is essential. That's my point.
Thank you so much. And for the last, just in sum, just the points that I could get from my very, very short presence in this forum, I believe that you both believed in the way that this digital processing of humanities entails a kind of humanistic approach to it, to make it to remove just its technical nature, and to kind of bridge between humanities and digital era. Am I right? Was that Dr. Khosravi? I got from your words how we can bridge between technical era and humanistic approach to it.
Actually, it can be sort of very short answer, but not the right answer, I guess, to put digital humanities in a humanistic way. Okay, we are going to talk with them and let them know, for example, we are concerned about the gender issues, sexuality things, racial blah blah, and they are going to put it into effort. As far as I see, there is no inclination to do that. The problem is that the basis, the foundational of materials of technology and humanities are in contrast. Technology, as in the Greek terminology is famous, is about doing things in practice. It is about how to do things in order to have a benefit. For example, in the new terms, in the European one, we have, for example, utilitarianism. It is about how you can access something in order for your own benefit. It is in the own benefit of the individual, actually. In contrast to humanities, which is about not just for the benefit, not just for money, it is about having things to discuss, having things to share. It is for the society, at least for the community.
The benefit of society.
So it is sort of in contrast. And I don't know how two things which are basically completely opposite are going to merge or marry in the next future. But it is a possibility. Maybe we can embed our critical views in the next generations of digital humanities. But right now, it is sort of completely different, because methodology is not something that you can reduce it to method, and you cannot reduce methods to tools. But just an example, tools we have right now for digital humanities are all, as far as I see, all of them are Western. And we are just customizing those platforms for our own sake. And because of that, the very first thing that may come to your mind is that there is a disparity between you and the enterprise that had developed the software package. And they are going to make money of that, and you are going to just pay for it, and blah, blah. That's lots of political economy material. The other thing is that, okay, because they had coded the software, they are the designer, as they call it in English, rule makers or rule breakers. If one day they are going to stop providing services to you, for example, sanctions of United States against Iran, how we are going to use those digital humanities tools? And the very similar, simple thing we have experienced in Iran is about, for example, in the case that you are not activating your Windows as a operating software, it is going to affect your computer. You are not going to use it anymore. So what happens if it is going to be done about the digital humanities tools? And starting to have our own digital humanities tools is not something that you can done, as Dr. Cheng mentioned, also done in a day. For example, in University of Imam Sadeh, about 10 years ago, there was a project on the designing and developing a software to analyze Persian texts. As far as I know, they tried to do it in a beta version, but it has never been released to the market. It is not used in that university either right now. So what is the benefit of designing something when you are not going to use it? And it is going to continue for a long time. Putting things back to its humanistic basics is not as easy as it is in Word.
Thank you so much. So this methodological analysis of humanities, while it has got its advantages for researchers and including in higher academic education, it also has risks and some disadvantages, and which is mainly, I suppose, which is mainly related to the way that it can be a context of exercising power, whether through exercising power based on gender gap or power of social classes, and the way that it gives power to those who accesses and those who created, especially with the concern that it is usually dominated by English language. Most of the digitalized humanities are in the field of English language. Therefore, it can have the potential of being related to power relations. I do apologize for missing your speech, and I'm so sorry, first of all, for myself, and I do appreciate your participation, and thank you so much, Dr. Khosravi. It was very interesting to hear your words, and Dr. Cheng from Hong Kong. It was my honor and pleasure to be here.
Excuse me, one of the participants in our institute is going to ask something if we have enough time.
Yes, please.
Okay, please. Can you hear him?
You hear me?
I have a voice.
Please continue.
Not now.
The same problem here.
Come over here.
Okay, so
روشن کنم. روشنه. It's on. Just put it.
We can hear you, Doctor.
So sorry for the problem. First, I do appreciate both professors, Dr. Khosravi and Dr. Cheng. The discussions were very valuable, insightful, and informative. Just I have a very small question, because actually, as a researcher in translation studies, it always was a concern for me that how digital humanities actually can help uh, translators, especially local ones, because you rightly mentioned uh, that DH can be dehumanizing and maybe rehumanizing,
Yeah.
And DH has been criticized for its uh, being entangled with, let's say, linguistic and cultural imperialism
Mm.
and blah blah. So, from the second part of your discussion, I would like to see your take on how, let's say, scholars of translation, especially the local ones in here,
Mm.
can benefit from the implications of DH.
Okay. I guess the very first answer, the short answer, is that they can use Google Translate in order to have the first draft of their translation, and then they are going to correct those things that were not translated by the machine. But it is one of those obstacles of digital humanities that, for example, translation from English to Persian is much more difficult. For example, I don't know, maybe just an example, to French, for example. But it is not just about the obstacles, but also about the opportunities of digital humanities. In the other thing, one of the things that's happening around the world is providing knowledge repositories and encyclopedias at the same time, specific search engines in local languages and local languages translators. For example, a scholarly community can gather and provide a glossary of specific terms in humanities in their own language and put it as a knowledge repository to that search engine. So in the case that it's going to translate it by the machine, those keywords are going to be done much more better. But it's very something technical. If you are talking about the more ontological, epistemological,
Yeah,
and
my question is ontological
yeah,
one. It's
um,
epistemic.
that's a big question. In the mechanistic way, digital humanities is a good way for translation. But in the sense of that you are going to have a free translation, that means how a translator mm, know the local context, know which messages cannot be conveyed in that specific language, which messages should not be received because, for example, of the censorship in the times of publication. It is not something that can be done by digital humanities, at least right now. For example, if we return to the Martin Heidegger's words about the contact between the brain and the hands of the writer, it's about the translator thing and the machine. If you are doing something based on the what computer provided for you, it can be sort of dismantling. Um, I don't know, just a very basic idea. Dismantling the subjectivity of translator. He or she is sort of getting distance from his or her own culture, and I guess it is going to. I'm not going to call it ruin or destroy, but it's going to change, transform the way of translation and the outcome drastically.
I see. And the last question, there is a maybe, I don't know, is it a misconception or it's right one among scholars of translation again, that if we translate in local knowledge and discourses into the dominant languages like in
Mhm.
English, and they digitize them,
Okay.
this is a kind of, let's say, resistance. Do you agree with this conception or not?
Um, Actually, in the terms of cultural studies, I guess resistance must be shown against a power. If something is trying to dominating you, then you are going to resist it. And it backs to those ideas of, for example, taking globalization as a force in order to have the other parts of the world under their own imperialism. But I don't see if you are going to translate a text, you are going to resist something, and they have produced the text for their own sake, and you were the volunteer to translate it. So
for the sake of visibilizing the invisible local humanities.
yes, it will help that it's not just about the visualization of the data, it's also about being visible all around the humanities scholar in the global world. But the thing is that there is an asymmetry. How many citations you receive if you are from a Harvard affiliation, and how many you are going to be read if you are an Iranian scholar. How many books by for example, in English are going to be translated all around the world, and how many of Iranian novels are going to be translated. Specifically, if you are doing in a non-professional way, if you are amateur, for example, of translation practice, and you are doing it digitally, most probably you are visible all around the world. Nobody is going to censor your text, but on the other hand, nobody is going to see you. You are not part of the dominant discourse of translation or literature.
So the criterion is being
Different.
visibility.
Yeah.
And can we, let's say, see this as a practice in digital humanities or not?
Yes, I guess that's a very beginning step.
It's a big mistake.
I guess so.
Thank you very much.
That was my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khosravi. Can we sum up what we had from this discussion?
Yes, sure, please.
Actually, as I mentioned before, I just know just a few words and of your speech. As I got, we discussed about the unprecedented speed of digital revolution in our era. And this digitalized humanity is also inevitable, just to not to broaden the gap between our country and the developed countries. So whether we are a technophobia or a technophile country, we are using it. And that's it. Actually, I couldn't get, unfortunately, more of your words, and I missed almost all the words of Dr. Cheng. If it is possible, please, Dr. Khosravi, complete my words to sum up this discussion.
Okay, because Professor Cheng is going to leave us soon, I'm going to just say a few words. I can sum it up like this, that we are not going to say if digital humanities is going to happen or not, is it good or bad. It is a trend, a mega trend in the scholarship, and because most of the texts we are using, even in Iranian academia, are Western things, and even if we are criticizing them, these mega trends are going to happen all around the world. And the best thing is just try to, first of all, make ourselves familiar with the technology, try to use them, have some interactions with them, then criticize them. Stop just saying that we don't want it, or for example, say, okay, that's great. Either way is sort of impossible and implausible, in my opinion. That's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was very valuable and informative. Let's announce the end of this forum. It was my honor to be here with you. Thank you, Dr. Cheng, for accepting our invitation. Wishing you a good day and a happy new Chinese year. And
Thank you.
advance
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Cheng. Wishing
Thank
you
you
a
very
happy
much.
new year. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Khosravi.
you.
Have a good day.
Hey.
Thank you
Have a
very
good day.
much. Yeah.